Hi, I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach the City Ministries, and I want to congratulate you who have persevered and come all the way through to now the destination of our journey of lament. We've learned about a down-up pattern of redemption where we're brought low by pain and affliction, and we hit bottom and we yield and cry out, and then God begins to visit us and disclose himself to us and remind us and reveal to us the things we were blind to in the midst of our pit. And then we find the first thing is we realize there is a plan of redemption. God is working, but we're not yet there. There's something lurking that has probably been damaged and distorted by all the pain and suffering we've gone through. And that is, how do we see God? In Lamentations 3, verses 33 through 41, Jeremiah outlines his fresh view of God for that he is emerging from the pit with. He wants to say some things to his fellow sufferers about who God is. Let me read these to you and hear this as a clearer picture of the intentions and heart of God. After visiting us with great compassion, if he afflicts us, he gives us abundant compassion. Jeremiah says this, "For he does not afflict willingly or grieve the sons of men, to crush under his feet all the prisoners of the land, to deprive a man of justice in the presence of the Most High, to defraud a man in his lawsuit. Of these things the Lord does not approve. Who is there who speaks and it comes to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both good and ill go forth? Why should any mortal, any man, offer complaint in view of his sin? Let us examine and probe our ways, and let us return to the Lord. We lift up our heart and hands towards God in heaven." Most of us have a picture of God that's like a blown-up picture of our parents, for good or for ill, or some other powerful authority figure in our minds that loom large towards us as kids. So it's always important that we, in the midst of suffering, we're willing to be open to the fact that maybe, just maybe, God is a little bigger and more complex than our simple, magical, formulaic ideas of him made him out to be. There's more to God than straight reward and punishment, good behavior, bad behavior. God is complex, unfathomably awesome, and there's things of him we don't really see too well until we are in the pit and come out of it. The first thing we want to see about God has to do with his heart. One of the things we mistakenly conclude in the pit of affliction is that God is some impersonal scientist up in the sky conducting sadistic experiments on poor human beings on earth. That somehow he gets a delight out of our trouble, out of our pain, out of making us suffer. That he's out to get us. He's not good. So Jeremiah says this in verse 33, "He does not afflict willingly or grieve the sons of men." It pains him to allow pain into our lives, to see us be shattered and broken. That's not what he would prefer. If it's necessary, if it simply must happen, and if there's no other way, okay. But he's not wearing a smile. These are awful and terrible means that he doesn't go to in the first resort. This is the last resort. And he's a patient, forgoing, forgiving, forbearing God. So in Jeremiah's day, they repeatedly spurned his grace and pardon and ended up in the judgment of exile. And it broke God's heart. The second thing that we need to adjust in our sorrow, in our affliction, in this season of bombardment of grief, is how we see God with regards to justice. It is easy to conclude not just that God doesn't care or he's bad, but it's easy to conclude that he literally thinks injustice is great, that he applauds and approves of injustices and evils that afflict us. Nothing could be further from the truth. Jeremiah says this, to crush under his feet all the prisoners of the land. These are guilty people who are imprisoned, but the authorities are literally destroying them, going beyond punishment. They're being cruel to the prisoners. God says, no. To deprive a man of justice in the presence of the Most High. People go to court to redress wrongs, to settle disputes. The weak and oppressed looking for relief from the court against the unjust strong who are pushing them down. And these corrupt judges are aiding and abetting the evil oppressions of the strong and destroying and harming the weak and the petitioners who have justice on their side, and they're doing it before the face of God. God hates that. To defraud a man in his lawsuit. Corruption, bribery, these things that pervert justice. Look what it says in the end of verse 36. Of these things the Lord does not approve. God is not only not a God of sadism, he is not a God who does wickedness, does evil. He does not approve, ever, one bit of evil done by anyone, anywhere, anytime. He hates it. We need to understand that God is truly good in his heart and in what he approves, or we're going to find a wall between us and him that we cannot penetrate. We come to the next issue, which is God's control. You may say, well, God's good, but if he's good and evil happens, then either he's not able to stop evil or he's not really good. He lets evil slide. Well, Jeremiah goes on in verses 37 and 38 to fully own God's sovereign control over the universe. Here's what it says. Who is there who speaks and it comes to pass unless the Lord has commanded it? People can say everything they want. They could threaten us. They could say things. They could be intimidating and scary. They can plot and plan, but nothing actually is allowed to happen, actually come to pass, unless our good God signs off on it. There must be a redemptive purpose, something that furthers his good agenda in this terrible situation, in what these people are threatening. They can't do one thing beyond what God permits. And that kind of protective control, that limiting sovereign power of God, isn't proof that he's not good. It's a demonstration that he's supremely good. While granting human beings choices and decisions, he is bending everything and limiting everything to further his will and only his will. And Jeremiah is honest. Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and ill go forth? So we're not evading and avoiding. God says, the buck stops with me. I take full responsibility for everything in my universe. And the things that people seem to be getting away with, the things that they're seemingly doing right in front of my face or right beside my feet, those things will all be fearfully dealt with when I have my final say-so at the end. We can rest in God's judgment of evil and trust him to use intermediate things in the meantime that only further his will. This section on restoring our view of God now ends with not who God is, but in light of who God is, what's our response? I don't know about you, but I'm a natural-born complainer. Arguing is not difficult. Blaming comes very naturally. And it's very true that when we're suffering and God seems absent and unresponsive, that we harbor complaints, we harbor blaming against him. We see him as at fault and wronging us. That's certainly how Job felt in those first many chapters of Job after his horrible trials and before God showed up. There was that complaint against God. How could you? is what Job was saying. And here, same thing, but Jeremiah says, wait a minute, we're forgetting something. What's that? Why should any living mortal or any man offer complaint in view of his sins? Oh, right. I'm speaking against a perfect being, an infinite, all-good person, an ultimate person, and I, a little tiny person on earth who commits constant sins in thought, word, and deed. Who am I to haul God into court and to accuse him of being a wrongdoer when I myself have very dirty hands and dirtied eyes and a dirtied mouth and heart? Who am I to accuse and blame God? I don't have any ground to stand on. I don't have a peg to hold on to. Instead, the right thing to do in this time of trial and season of brokenness and going all the way down is to ask this: maybe there's something God is trying to show me about what I don't see about me. Some things lurking in there, that ugly things that trials are going to bring out. That's why Jeremiah says, let us examine and probe our ways. Let's submit to some spiritual soul surgery and let God open our eyes to things, motives, connecting the dots, ugly attitudes and areas, strongholds of bitterness and pride and lust and all kinds of stuff in there we'd rather not talk about or look at. Let's look at it. And in light of that, let's return to the Lord. Instead of proudly holding ourselves aloof and judging and shaking our fist at him, the state of our real status before him says it's time for humility. It's time to humbly seek him. It's time to go to him with our sin, to seek his forgiveness, to be restored and return to him, knowing he's been compassionate and kind to us when we didn't deserve it one bit. And Jeremiah then ends, we lift up our heart and our hands towards God in heaven. Instead of shaking our fist and demanding satisfaction, we appeal to him for mercy and forgiveness, and we look to him, and he never disappoints. We've made it. We've come all the way to the end of this series, and you can imagine we have skimmed the surface. There are depths of every last one of these verses. We could meditate and ponder. We could do a soul search, heart check. We could just delve into this for a long time, and let me encourage you to do just that. It's easy to hear a bunch of concepts and go, isn't that nice? And totally miss the blessing, the promise of going down to go up, the redemptive V. I hope you have the faith and the courage to take the bull by the horns, to enter into the wrestling match and wrestle with the living God in the name of Jesus, in the power of the Spirit, when you're at the depths, when you're struggling and angry and bitter and frustrated and God seems absent and aloof, and all your attempts to make yourself better and fix it have failed, and you are just rock bottom, and then you give up. And then you willingly bow down, you worship. You yield and appeal for mercy, and then he visits, he opens your eyes, he begins to show you what the whole big picture is, and more importantly, reveal his true heart to you. And you find yourself in an even better spiritual place than before, when you were comfortable and unafflicted and unaffected, and perhaps even a little apathetic and not very open to going the hard places God wanted to take you. So there it is. I invite you to come to the banquet table and feast your weary, empty heart on the riches of what Jeremiah has taken us through in this journey of lament in a very deep place. Thank you.